Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, January 14th, 2021. This is episode number 4, Illusions of Time. Welcome to the Duron Coles Morning Show with me, the host, Duron Coles. Today, I didn't really want to get into too much finance or business talk because there's not too much going on in the world revolving that. So I just wanted to really get into some thought-provoking conversations or into, I guess, my little spiel. I was watching this video yesterday made by VSauce. Michael from VSauce is back. If you know, you know. He disappeared for a long time. So he's back making videos, and I came across one of his videos called Illusions of Time, which hence the title of today's morning show. And as I was watching this, I was truly just being mind blown by the things he was showing the audience related to time and the way that we as humans have been programmed to think of time. And he also was talking about, as my title said, illusions of time. The real name for those are temporal illusions, just like with optical illusions, they have to do with your eyes, optics. Temporal illusions have to do with time. So anytime that you, not just you, but we as humans feel that time slows down or speeds up or is staying still, that's a temporal illusion. So to give great examples of temporal illusions, if you're waiting in line with no phone for 2 minutes, you might feel as though you've been waiting in there for an hour. But if you're with your friends and you're in an escape room and they say you have 60 minutes left, next time you look up, you think that it's been 5 minutes, but it's really been 30 minutes. And you're like, there's no way that time has been moving this fast. Those are examples of temporal illusions. Time isn't speeding up or slowing down. It's constant. But our mind has really trained to go with one or the other. And there's many theories about that, and I took some notes while I was watching this because, like I said, I just wanted to blow everyone else's mind just like my mind was being blown. So there's two theories on why, first and foremost, these two phenomena happen. It's called the short-long theory and the long-short theory. So what those mean is you perceive time as short when you're having a whole lot of fun or things that are thought-provoking, and you remember them for a long time. So, for example, if it's a holiday, it's also called the holiday paradox, if you want to look that up. And if we're at holidays with our family, we perceive time as short because we're like, dang, this whole day flew by. But we remember those times for a really long time because our day was full of things we wanted to do, full of memories. On the other hand, if we're perceiving time as long, for example, in I'll give the example he gave. He said if you have a 4-hour flight delay and you're stuck inside the airport for 4 hours, it might feel like you're there all day, but we don't remember those things for a long time. Even though at the time they were long, we remember them for a short period of time, hence the name long short and short long. And the scientists feel that has to do with the fact that either memories are either going to be empty or they're going to be full. And if something is full of memories, you remember them for the time spans by short, but we remember them for a long time. And if there's empty, like he also gave the example of if you binge watch a TV show. Actually, I'll remember that. I'll get back to that in like 2 minutes. But if you like I said with the flight delay, even though that's happening for a long time, or we perceive it to happen for a long time, since that day is empty, there's no memories that we're making. We perceive that time to be really short or really long, but we don't remember it for a long time. And he said the new phenomenon that is coming about is actually short, and that's only been a thing since about the 60s or 70s, or even like later, the 80s. he said because of the way that we're able to entertain ourselves and we don't need to make lasting memories, a phenomenon of short is actually happening. And what I mean by that is he used the example of binge watching TV shows. If you're watching, I'll use what I just did the other day. I binge watched The Queen's Gambit, and time flew by. Like, I started at like 10 a.m. Next thing I knew, it was 10 p.m. and the show was over. And I was like, wait, I watched this whole thing? He said, we're perceiving those times as short because it's so entertaining. He said, but unless you can really, really connect with the show, we're actually not making any memories of those times, and we're perceiving them short as well. So that's why they're saying short. We're not looking back at them as like I used the example of a holiday with your friends or your family. We look back on those and we go, dang, that day was so long, it was so good. Even though at the time we perceived it as short, we look back and we can remember all the minute details of when you got in the car and how long it took you guys to get to wherever you went, and you guys went ice skating and you did this and you did that. We can remember those minute details. That's where the long aspect comes. But when we're binge watching these TV shows, or we're on our phone all day, or those type of things that we're only able to do now that people weren't able to do 60, 70, 80 years ago, it's actually being perceived as short. And I hope without a visual aid this makes sense. So going on from there, a lot of the other things he talked about, another one of the things he talked about, is the protagonist syndrome, and that had to do a lot with what he was talking about when it came to those theories. The protagonist syndrome is when we feel as though we are the main character of life, like the whole book of life. Imagine if it was a book, that whole story, we're the main character of it. Anyone we walk by, and I'll use two examples for gamers and for movie heads like me. Anyone else that walks, we're the main character in the game, in the video game, and anyone else that we walk by is an NPC. So if you're in Walmart and you're looking for toilet paper or something, and you go by a mom and two kids, we just look at them like, oh, they exist, but they don't do anything. They don't really have a future or a past or anything. We just go by them, and we know that we have a family, and we have goals and aspirations and things that make us happy, things that make us sad, but no one else does. We don't think about people that way. That's called the protagonist syndrome. And why that becomes an issue is we feel like the world revolves around us, and people may think that doesn't have to do with time, but we'll get there. So going straight from the protagonist syndrome, he talked about two other theories, one called the ab ovo syndrome and one called the media rest syndrome. So ab ovo is Latin, and it directly translates to of the egg, but used in real terms, it means from the beginning, or from the very, very beginning. So another thing that relates to the protagonist syndrome is us thinking that as soon as we were born, or as soon as we stepped into the situation, that's when things started to happen. We are the beginning. And I know for me, I struggle with that a lot. I always tell my friends or my girlfriend or my family, like, nothing happened before I got here. I look back, for example, let's say I met someone at work, and they'll tell me a story about something that happened to them when they were 6 or something. I'm like, you don't have memories. Like, you don't have some things that have happened to you before me. And I've always laughed at things like that, and I didn't know that there was a real syndrome or a real psychological phenomenon. I just knew it was something that I did. But it's apparently something a lot of people struggle with, thinking that we are the beginning. And to use a movie, as soon as we die, that's when the credits end. We have all the climaxes, the anything that happens in our life is when people start to take notice. Anything that happened before us was just the prelude. And the other syndrome that he talked about is media res, which means in the middle. That's the very opposite. And you think that you were born in the middle of the whole story. You know that you're not the beginning and the end, but you just got plopped in there. So anything that happened before you was the story, and you're able to really, really acknowledge it. And all the things that are happening during and after, they're not just because of you. You're in the middle of it. That's called media res. And that's why the protagonist syndrome has to do with time, because we perceive our time to be the most, the highest time, or the most elite time, because it has to do with us. And to give a few examples of that, and these are what really blew my mind. He said we always think about our time as being the most elite time, and anything else before us is old or antiquated. If you look at the Lion King, which was made in 1994, the Lion King is closer to being made to the moon landing, which was in 1969, than it is today. And we think about today, or think of the Lion King as new, and we're like, oh, okay, like the Lion King didn't come out too long ago. We were kids when we watched that. But the moon landing is, it's old, it's black and white, that happened 100 years ago. But it's actually closer to being made then, back in the 60s, than it is to now. And the only thing that we have the only reason we do that psychologically is because we were alive for both time periods. We are the common factor. The 90s had us, if you were born in the 90s, sorry if you weren't. The 90s had us, and now has us. But the 60s didn't have us, so we're not as connected to it. And we say, that time didn't matter, or that time was so old. Another example he gave is, use your grandparents. Your grandparents probably, I know mine do, and he said his did as well, always tell stories about how when they were kids, they had to go outside, and there were no phones, there were no TVs, there was nothing like that. People wrote letters. And when we hear that, we go, yo, that is so old. I can't believe people existed like that. Or even when I look back at old movies, and I see people riding horses, and they have to give like their mail guy letters, and it takes weeks for mail to travel just to say one simple thing. I always think like, yo, I really, really don't understand how people live like that. That's so old. But now use yourself. When we have children, if you would like to have children, or use your younger siblings, or just use people that will come after us, when we tell them that, oh yeah, there were times before touchscreen phones, there were times before 4K, before videos looked realistic, they were just pixely. You would play a PlayStation 1 game. If we say PlayStation 1 to a 6-year-old today, they're like, PlayStation 1? There's only ever been a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5. And you're like, no, you just don't get it. There used to be PlayStation 1. There used to be Nintendo 64. They go, wow, that's really old. And we're like, no, like those were the good days. That's when games were really alive and well. And that's how we perceive our time, as the most elite time. Same thing with the kid. The kid will go, no. Right now with smartphones and games on our smartphone, games on being able to put on a virtual reality headset, that's the most elite time. And people will look back on in 30 years and look at those kids and go, you guys are old. You guys used to have to put on virtual reality headsets. We just blink and it happens. So just the way that these temporal illusions work really, really, really just gets me thinking. And we always think that we're going to be here forever, honestly, and we think that time like sits still for us. Like, I know for me, and this is another one, I've thought about this before Michael on VSauce said it, but to really, really sit down and think about it again, I was like, wow, it's crazy. At least I am, I don't know about most of my listeners out there, but I am the same age and actually older now than my mom was when she had me. And I know I'm ignorant to a lot of like, I don't know what I'm doing in this world or what life means. And we look at our parents when we're young, growing up, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. We're like, oh, our parents have it all figured out. They're going to work. They're doing all these good things. And now I'm that age, and I look like, I know my mom didn't have it figured out because I don't have it figured out. And those temporal illusions, or those, when you look at time that way, it makes you really empathetic. Even teachers. And when I remember being in first grade, and my teacher, she was really, really, really young, like really young. And I remember looking up to her like, wow, I want to be like her when I grow up. But now I may not be, but I'm close to the same age that she was back then. And I'm like, yo, people are looking up to her, or people are looking up to me, and I don't have it figured out. You guys have no idea what you're asking for trying to be like me. So I don't know. Time in general is a weird concept, and first and foremost, I guess we have to realize that we made it. It's a man-made subject and object and concept. And I want to give more examples of the time illusions that he gave us. So to give you more time illusions, just so you can think about, like, wait. How you think about your concept of time isn't primarily how time is actually going. There's two different types of time. There's abstract time and concrete time. Concrete time is when we try to put an exact date around something, like, oh, I know that this happened around the 1940s or 1950s or something. And abstract time is when you just give it a general, like, landmark, like, oh, that happened in a big time, like the Renaissance. Some of the huge concepts of time that he said we as humans think we know that we actually don't know are, when we think of the dinosaurs, we go, oh, dinosaurs are so old. Like, dinosaurs are before man. But what we don't realize is T-Rexes went extinct about 60 million years ago, which obviously that's an unfathomable amount of time. But when we think of, if I told you to imagine a Stegosaurus Rex, you would be like, oh, like they roamed around together, and there were all types of dinosaurs around each other. But actually, Stegosaurus Rex, I think I'm saying that correctly, Stegosauruses, they went extinct 80 million years before T-Rexes even were about or came about. So at that time, the T-Rexes were walking around. They were Stegosauruses were actually older then than T-Rexes are to us now. We think T-Rexes are barbaric and so beyond old. But what we don't realize is Stegosauruses are even older than that. Or another good one was, another one that we don't realize is the Queen and Marilyn Monroe. If you think about them, you're like, oh, the Queen is pretty old and whatever. Marilyn Monroe, anytime you imagine her, I've never imagined or seen an old Marilyn Monroe. From my understanding, I think she died pretty early, so we don't ever get to see any old pictures of her. The Queen of England and Marilyn Monroe were actually born in the same year, 1926. And another thing is both of them, the Queen is actually older than chocolate chip cookies. Chocolate chip cookies were invented after the Queen was born. And a funny one I saw on there, and I can't stop doing the math regarding this, is because of, I know we think of the world is old, but in general, America, where most of my viewers and I are from, America is actually a pretty young country. China and the countries that are in the East, they're like really, really old countries that have been around for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. America is 250 years old. So we're actually a really young country. And Barbara Walters, who is 91 years old, has lived through 33% of all of America's history. All of it. She was born in 1920. So just think about that. And what people are starting to do now, because of how old she is they're starting to use her as a measurement of time. I read yesterday that Baby Yoda is 0.5555 Barbara Walters old. Another good one. This one I still can't believe, and I can't really wrap my head around it. When Harriet Tubman was born, Thomas Jefferson was alive, and when she died, Ronald Reagan was alive. Thomas Jefferson, who signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and Ronald Reagan, who was the president in 1980s. Harriet Tubman was alive for both of them. But if you take a step back and do the math, when Jefferson died, Harriet Tubman was 4, I believe. Yeah. And when she died, Ronald Reagan was 2. Ronald Reagan was born in 1911. So we think of Harriet Tubman as freeing the slaves in the 1770s or the 1800s. We don't even perceive or think that she ever lived to the 1900s. But she was alive until 1913. So I just think in general that if we take a step back, and there's actually a saying for what I talked about earlier for the protagonist syndrome and what the opposite of that is. Protagonist syndrome is obviously thinking you're the main character of the story, but being Sonder, there's actually a psychologist who came up with the term Sonder, and I'll explain to you guys where you've heard that word before. And I wish there was a better backstory to it, but there's not. I'll explain to you guys where you've heard that word before. Being Sonder is realizing the fact that everyone around you also has their own story, that you're not the only one with a story. So as you walk by that, or as you wait behind that person in line at the ATM, and they're taking so long because they're on the phone or they're dropping their wallet and stuff, they're not just some person that like, ugh, you were wasting 2 minutes of my time, and they walk away and you never see them again. They actually have hopes and desires, and may or may not have a family, may or may not be someone's cousin, nephew, son, brother. They may or may not have a job, a car, all these different aspects. We look at ourselves and get so enveloped in our lives that we think like, oh, we can't really have time, no pun intended, to worry about other people, because in reality there's 7 billion of us, and we have the duty of taking care of us, the one person. It's almost unfathomable to try to think about every situation that's going on around the world at the same time. And that always is a hard realization for me. I know a lot of people, especially in this day and age, they take the time, they want to take their time and get a lot of money to try to help world hunger and help AIDS and help cancer and help the homeless, and just there's so many issues out there because there are so many people. And if you just think about how many things are going on out there, if one person is doing, or yeah, if for every person out there, if they're just doing one thing, which is waking up, that means there's 7 billion things happening going on at the same time, not including the animals, not including the plants, There's so many things going, not including that we are all spinning on Earth at the same time. There's so many things happening at once that it will literally mind boggle you to try to think about all these things at once. But to go back, where you guys, most of you guys have probably heard Sonder before, that's Brent Faiyaz, the really popular R&B artist. That's the name of his group. It's called Sonder. And the name of his like hit album back in 2017 was Sonder Son. And I went and looked it up because I was like, I knew that I had heard that word somewhere before, so I went and looked it up. And I was really, really hoping that Brent Faiyaz would have like some type of great backstory behind it, or some type of, I don't know, I guess I was looking for like the etymology of the word, which is, etymology is the study of how words were created. I was like, oh, I guess he'll be the one to have done all the research and stuff, but he didn't do anything like that. He heard of the concept that I heard of, the fact that Sonder is realizing that you're not the only one with a story, and he said, oh, that's cool, and he got it tattooed on him. Like that's the whole story. And his friends, he just met these guys, and they were talking about making a group together, a music group together, and they couldn't think of any names, so they saw his tattoo and said, yo, we should use that. Sonder sounds awesome. And he said, no, I just got this tatted and I just met you guys. we're not going to use that, because if this breaks up, or if I end up hating you guys, I gotta look at this reminder every day of my life. And then they couldn't think of any other name, so they settled for Sonder Son. But some of the other time illusions I wanted to talk about was I guess the best word was to say is how we perceive time. He said that there's a good thought experiment that goes around. If I told you to predict like how long I've been talking right now, you might come up with a great guess, because you can perceive that time, you can feel this time. But if I put you in a windowless room and I said, okay, tell me, you're allowed to get out after you think 1 year has passed, very honestly, it'll be very hard for anyone to accurately predict how long it took or takes for a year to pass. It will most likely be a couple, maybe at most, the best person might maybe last a couple months, but most of us would probably last like 20 days max, and just be like, yeah, it has to have been a year by now. It has to have been a year, because time, there's nothing going on here. And there's actually, if you want to look up some videos, Michael from, it's going to sound like I got a sponsorship from them, but I promise I didn't. Michael from VSauce actually did a video on that, where he had to spend 3 days in a isolated room. There's no windows, just him in like one of those, you know, those rooms that you see that are like bubble wrapped, where crazy people go. He spent 3 days in there in isolation, and he said it felt like months. So just the way that we perceive time, and the fact that we all perceive it differently. What I think is 10 minutes might be different from what my next door neighbor thinks 10 minutes is. Or the fact that like me, I know without a phone it'd be excruciatingly hard for me to wait in line for 5 minutes without a phone, and I just have to stand there, and they said you have to stand still. There's no way I'd be able to do it. I would have to walk around. I'd have to like fidget, hands in my pocket, take them out, put them back in, rub my head. Like, I'd have to do something. I can't just sit there. And that's the story for a lot of people. If you told, I know it's for kids, if you tell a kid to sit still for 2 minutes and tell them they can't move, they have to stare straight ahead for 2 minutes and not look away. Good luck. So, I don't know, there's so many theories on time and I guess perception, the way we not only perceive time but perceive the world, that It's just mind-boggling. I don't really want to jump into perception because I want that to have its own episode, but just to give like a tad bit of it, like 30 seconds. The way that you perceive the world and the way that I perceive the world and the way that someone in Ethiopia perceives the world and someone in Iceland perceives the world is I don't know how many examples I gave, 4 or 5, but those are 4 completely different perceptions of life. And if we all tried to tell the story of life, we would all have a very hard time trying to match the same story. I mean, even in America, it's the same thing. If you took someone from Tuskegee, Alabama, or took someone from Flint, Michigan, and then took someone from Phoenix, Arizona, and Beverly Hills, California, 4 completely different places, they'll tell you 4 completely different stories of what life in America is like. But at the same time, it's very weird that they still might have a lot of the same jokes or same commonalities that they thought were related only to their specific area, like slang that they thought only they used. And they're like, someone from California, they're like, how do you know that? So like I said, I'll make perception have its own episode, but those are just, like I said, this is more so just a thought-provoking episode. Don't really want to get into much finance or entrepreneurship or business. Just start off. I really should have did this one tomorrow on a Friday so you could start your weekend and think about all this mind-blowing stuff. But it's okay. We'll start off our Thursday and try to encapsulate all these thoughts. Or some other ones I had. I'll do some more, and then I'll bring some people to the stage and see what they think about time. Some other ones I had was feeling time. There's actually two ways to feel time, and that's perspectively and retrospectively. So feeling time perspectively is when you feel time now and what you think. It's kind of like what I was saying with the short and full, but not 100%. So the short aspect of it, or if you're using, for example, short long, the short aspect of it, the number 1 is perspectively, and then when you're looking back at it, that's retrospectively. So when you're going through stories in themselves, stories are a huge anomaly when it comes to this. When we're going through something at the time, it could be heartbreak, it could be Christmas, it could be you can literally use any example. When we're in that time perspectively at the now, we are thinking that it's either the end of the world, or this is the best moment of our life, or this moment will never end, or I hope this moment keeps going. And then when we look at the time retrospectively, when we look back at it, most times, if it's something negative, most times when we tell a story about it, it's never as bad as we perceive it to be in that moment. Like I know I have stories where, like, I'm at when I was younger, I used to go to parties and I'd have to like, if the party got shut down, I'd have to run or something like that, and I'm running like, dag, this I hope this doesn't go bad, or I hope things turn out well. And then I look back and the story is funny, but it has to be, you have to look back at it for it to be funny. It can't be funny in that moment because you're fearing for your life or something. Same thing if you use a story. People always tell you, I'll use swimming or something. If you're really, really scared of swimming, people will say, yo, just jump in. And at that time, you're perceiving it as the scariest thing you've ever done. You're like, yo, I just can't even imagine jumping into this water right now. And let's say now that was 3 years ago, and at this point you've learned how to swim and you've done all these different things. You'll look back retrospectively and go, I can't believe I ever felt that way. Like I don't even really remember feeling that way. I love swimming, or I love whatever that thing you fear doing. If you start to like it, or I mean, even if you if you still hate it and you were almost drowned or something, you might go, I can't believe that they convinced me to do that. And it might seem like it happened all in seconds back then, but it might have been a whole day of swimming or a whole day of trying to convince you. But looking back, you go, oh, that only lasted for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So perspective versus being retrospective is a huge anomaly when it comes to time. Just use your own self and think about any time where you thought that you couldn't believe this thing was happening or was not happening. It could be a job. Think about how long everything took in the moment, and then look back and how it all seems like it happened instantaneously. If you were trying to go get this new job, you had to apply for the job, you had to get a call back, then you had to go get a new outfit for the interview, you had to get dressed, you had to drive to the interview, then you went to the interview, you had to leave the interview, you told everyone if you did well or didn't do well, and let's just say you got the job. Or didn't. It doesn't really matter for the example. If you look back in a year, you're going to think that all that happened instantly. You're just going to think that all of that happened like I said, instantaneously. So, I guess what I want to do now is there anybody down there on the stage that wants to tell a story of perspective versus retrospective time? And like I just gave the examples, you tell me if there was something at that time you were like, yo, this is never going to end. And then you look back now and you're like, oh, that wasn't like that. I barely even remember that happened, or that seems like it happened instantaneously. Good morning. This is being recorded and put on YouTube, so if you want to introduce yourself, go right ahead, man. If not, you can stay anonymous. But just tell me, is there anything that you look back on that you're like, yo, I swear that this felt like this was never going to end, and now you look back and you're like, that seems instant.
Yeah. Give me a second. I apologize. I just got off work. I work night shift, so.
No problem. While you do that, I guess I could tell one more. Like I told in episode 2, or maybe that was episode 1, that I used to work. I worked at ShopRite for I don't even know how long, maybe 6 months, for example. And I remember waking up daily and thinking about that job and just hating it and hating myself for having to do it. Working shifts 7:30 to 3:30 or 6:30 to 3:30. I worked long days sometimes. Sometimes I worked 45-hour weeks, 50-hour weeks, and I wasn't making. It was just ShopRite. I wasn't making a crazy amount of money for it, but I was just a college student, and I remember going in and day out, and that seemed endless. And I did it for months, and I just thought that none of this would ever end. And as the months went by, I saved my money, and I was able to stop working there. And to think that was, I don't even know at this point, maybe 3 years ago, that seems like a blink of an eye that all that happened. Like, I can talk about it now as if it didn't happen, but I remember in that moment the gruelingness of it and just having to do it day in and day out. Same thing, I guess I could use college too, or you can even use high school or school in general. I remember being in high school thinking like, yo, I got to do this for 4 years. And now I look back and I went to high school 2011 to 2015. That was 6 years ago I graduated. And it seems like high school was the blink of an eye, but it was actually 4 years long. Are you ready, my man?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. I'll mute myself.
Good morning, everyone. Ray, I met Ron in college. Ron, it's actually funny you mentioned working at ShopRite. I work at ShopRite now. And compared to retrospectively, what were they? I'm sorry.
You're good. That's what I'm here for. So perspectively is like the right now. That's the right now, and retrospectively looking back on time.
Got you. So, prospectively, going through every single day, dealing with customers, just especially during COVID, shit getting crazy, stuff getting crazy. Um, I think about it every single day, and I go in, and I'm just like, man, this line seems like it's never gonna end. Man, these people seem like they just keep coming. But prospectively, retrospectively, I come back and I sit in my chair every single night, and I just think like, oh man, another 8 hours down. Like it was only 8 hours. It was no different than any other day. But in the moment, you feel like it is taking forever. It feels like it's taking so much longer, and you look down at the time every minute, and you're like, man, it's got to be at least 5 minutes going down now. You look at the same time every single time. It blows your mind.
That by itself, that is a great thing I should have talked about, because we all experienced that. And thank you, Ray, for sharing. And yeah, I met Ray in college. I didn't even. That's like I said, that's a time illusion, a temporal illusion. Time isn't moving any faster or slower or staying still, but and I know everyone can relate to when they're at work, they feel that way. Anybody. You're at work, especially my retail workers. Shout out to you guys. If you're standing in line, or rather, if you're standing at the cash register, you're waiting on the people in line, and you say it's all right. I get off at you started at 2, you get off at 10. You've been standing there for 6 hours, and it's only 3 o'clock. Like, it feels endless. And there's also times during the job where you're like, yo, time is moving by slow, and it's actually going by fast. I know that there's been times where I've had lines of customers, lines and lines and lines of customers, like it doesn't end, and I'm like, yo, I've been scanning forever. Like, oh my god, I've probably only been scanning for 20 minutes, and honestly, it was like an hour and a half it passed by, because I was so stuck in that moment of, I guess, monotony, and just doing something simple over and over and over. I gotta grab the canned soup and scan it. Gotta grab the cereal box and scan it over and over and over again. By the time you get to your 5th customer, you're like, yo, I hate this. I hate myself. And really, an hour and a half has passed by, which is, it's better. You start to realize after a while, it's better than just standing there and getting no customers. It's kind of a lose-lose situation. If you have no customers, there's no time passing, none at all. But if you get tons of customers, time will definitely go by fast. But then you're just stuck in this same waving arm motion. To tell a funny story, and I think Ray might be able to relate to this. A lot of retail workers might be able to relate to this, or maybe it's just me and I'm crazy. I used to do so many scans at ShopRite. Like, I did so many. To give you, I guess, perspective, no pun intended for perspective time, but to just give you a perspective of what I had to do or how many customers I had to deal with. There was only one ShopRite in Newark, New Jersey, because they had just closed the other one. They closed all the other like supermarkets around there. So there was only one ShopRite in Newark, New Jersey. And if you don't know, Newark, New Jersey is the most highly densely populated city in New Jersey. So there's only one for thousands of people. I was scanning so many customers that when I tried to go to sleep at night, I thought that, I don't know why, but I thought my pillow was that big bag of like Doritos with that mix pack, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and like scan it and move the pillow from underneath my head, and I would wake up pissed. I'd be like, yo, and I did that often, and I couldn't sleep because I was so used to being at work 8 hours, 10 hours a day. And then I was at school 8 hours a day. All I did was school and ShopRite. And I would sleep. And if I tried to sleep, I would always scan my pillow. I might think my pillow is a marshmallow or something. I don't know. But I just used to scan my pillow, and I couldn't sleep. And maybe that's just a me thing, because that's happened to me other times as well. I was in this play once, and and I had to like sing. So practicing my lines or practicing my singing, I would wake up in the middle of the night saying my lines. Like I would be asleep, and then I would just wake up saying them, and I'd look around thinking I was at the show, and I'm in my room, and I'm like, wait, I can't believe this keeps happening. So I'll let someone else come up to the stage if they want to. If not, I can tell more stories. Let me see. And it's 8:15 as well. If anybody has any questions about time or illusions of time, concepts of time, I can answer those as well if you don't have a story you want to tell. Okay, I was just about to keep going. Let's see. The floor is yours.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, a little bit. You could, if you could speak up just a little bit.
Okay, so I just had a question about what is it, protagonist syndrome? Like, do you feel that that's something that like we should be trying to like work on at all, or is it just like it is what it is type thing? Like, I just wanted to know like a little bit more about that.
Great question. I mean, all I can give you is my thoughts on it. And my honest thoughts are, yes, we should be trying to work on it. And as this show grows, people will know that I'm a yes and a no person, and I don't like to be that way, but most situations call you to look at both sides of a coin. So it's a yes and a no. Yes, you definitely should be trying to work on it. But the other side of the coin is, we're all we got. You have to look out for yourself, and I have to look out for myself, and we have to try to balance doing both. So that's why protagonist syndrome ends up being so common, because in general, protagonist syndrome, and especially, I know this is going to sound like biased, but I know especially in America, we don't really get taught teamwork like a lot of other countries. With that clearly shows in the way that America has handled COVID versus somewhere like China. In China, they very, very much are taught at a young age to believe in teamwork and to believe that we all need to work together to make for the good of society. That's honestly the opposite of protagonist syndrome. Worry about others before you worry about yourself. So in America specifically, we're taught if you want it, you got to grind for it, and all you can do is look out for you. So I definitely think it's something that we need to work on and become Sonder. Like I said earlier, Sonder is realizing that all the people around you have their own story as well. So a great example. I'll do two quick examples so that we can get to other questions, and we have time. It's 8:18. One example I like to use is once again in movies. If when I'm watching a movie, and the main character, I'll just use Fast and Furious or something. If the main character from Fast and Furious drives through a building and we just see some extra standing there, like, oh crap, and we don't ever see them for the rest of the movie, I've always looked at those people and thought about them. And even though they're never in the story, while I'm watching the rest of the movie, I'm thinking about these extras, like how are they going about their lives now? They were just standing in their office building and a car drove through it. Like, how do you go home and tell your wife, like, yo, I almost died because a car almost ran me over? And they're like, don't you work on the 30th floor? And you're like, yes, I do. And a car still almost killed me. That is being Sonder by itself, realizing that people aren't just extras. They have their own stories. Another example is one I sort of kind of already used with the ATM situation, but being quote unquote Sonder got me through ShopRite a lot. I know that I was at work and I had to grind to get there. Like, I had to grind to get through it, but I also realized that these people shopping weren't just customers or just people that were trying to annoy me. They also had stories. They also had to get groceries for their children, and they also have jobs that they most likely hate, and they are also going through their own lives and own things. So when I say, welcome to ShopRite, good morning, or how are you doing? How was your experience? And they go, ugh, just scan the groceries. They're not more so annoyed with me, but they have their own protagonist syndrome. They have to worry about their lives as well as the same way that I'm worrying about mine. So it's really a back and forth balance. If they're worried about themselves, I kind of have to take a step back and realize that. I guess my answer to your direct question is, should we work on our protagonist syndrome? I think the best way to work on it is to realize that we all have it. I think that's the best way to become Sonder. If I had to give a definition of being Sonder, or make up my own word, I would say the definition of Sonder is realizing that everyone has their own story. I would take it a step further and say realizing that everyone has protagonist syndrome. Everyone. It might be a spectrum. It might not be as bad as others that it is for everybody. Some people have it worse than others, where they're truly only trapped in their reality and they're like, nothing else matters but me. But I think the best way is to realize that we all have it. All of us. That was a great question. Any other questions? Okay, while we wait for questions, another example I have is, and I kind of only briefly spoke about it earlier, but interviews. Next time you go to an interview, maybe this will make you grind harder for it, or maybe it will make you feel bad about it. I don't know. But think about it like this. And this will help you become Sonder. As you apply for that new job you got, or want rather, because it pays X amount of dollars and you're like, I really need that right now. Think about the fact that 100 people applied for it, if not more. And you got called for an interview, right? That means at the minimum, and I only know these numbers, I was a manager for 4 years. At the minimum, if you got called for that position, let's say 7 to 10 others did as well. And of those 7 to 10, you have to realize that if you ultimately get the job, right? So you do your interview, you think that you have a great resume and you have a great background and stuff. Think about the reasons why you need that job so badly, and then put those reasons onto 7 other people as well. Once you get that job, that means 7 other people lost that job. You know what I mean? So maybe that will make you grind harder for it, or maybe it'll make you not want to apply for it at all. But that is basically the definition of Sonder. Realizing that others are going through the same things you're going through as well. It's not just you in this big story. You go, oh, well, I'm going to apply for the job, and if I get it, I get it, and if I don't, like, they just didn't like me or something. No, there was someone else who needed the job just as badly as you, and they might have grinded a little harder than you. I always feel that way during with sports. If anybody knows me, I'm a big sports head, and I love statistics, and I love the legacy building of sports. I watch for the wins, really, but more than that, I watch to see who can break the most records or who can become like truly the greatest of all time. I always talk about Derrick Rose, and watching old Derrick Rose highlights truly like breaks my heart, because Derrick Rose, in my opinion, had the potential to become the greatest basketball player of all time. Yes, over Michael Jordan. Yes, over LeBron James. Derrick Rose was 20 beating a prime LeBron James with Joakim Noah as his second best player. For those of you that don't know sports, I'm sorry, but Derrick Rose was the youngest MVP in basketball of all time on the Chicago Bulls, I believe back in 2011. He was 20, and no one had ever done that before. So if you use those same projections, and he was actually almost taking his team to the finals as well. He got injured in the Eastern Conference semifinals, and they were winning, and his team was up, I believe, by like 25 points, and his coach still had him in the game. Derrick Rose went to go do a dunk. He comes down on his leg, and he tears his MCL and his ACL, and he's never the same again. And it's crazy. I guess this kind of goes into my time illusions as well, because we think we know everything about time. Derrick Rose has, like I said, he won the MVP in 2011. So you would think now, using your head, oh, Derrick Rose is old or something. He's still younger than Steph Curry. He's still in the league, and we think so many things and so much time has passed since that injury that we just go, oh, Derrick Rose must be old and he's about to retire. He's younger than Russell Westbrook, Steph Curry. Like, he's younger than a lot of the people that we consider elites right now. He's younger than all of them. So imagine if during that time he had his time to sustain his legacy. I always look at stats and accolades that way, and I try to do projections off them. Like Mahomes, I love Patrick Mahomes because of the fact that he has the chance to build a crazy legacy. He's the first to do so many things. First to throw 100 touchdowns in 40 games, and first to the youngest player to get to 15,000 yards, and all these stats. It might be 10,000 yards, but it's all these different stats. So if you keep going with those projections, you'll do a lot of things before anyone else has done them. And I think that's crazy, because at the time, if you look back 20 years, let's say I'll use Dan Marino or something in the 80s, they probably looked at his touchdown statistics and go, yo, this is crazy. No one has ever done this before. No one will ever do this again. And now someone like Mahomes is doing it. And in 20 years, 30 years, someone else will come along and do it as well. And the evolution of not just sports, but humans in general has always been so fascinating to me. But if there's no questions, I'll definitely wrap it up there, and I'll let you guys get to a great Thursday. This is Friday Eve. And then after today, we got one day left, and we're headed for the weekend. All right, I'll let you beautiful people go, and I will see you tomorrow morning at 7:30, all right? End of episode 4.